Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LFC Transfer Room live stream with myself and Drew. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening on a quiet Monday evening. It's very quiet. It's just myself and Drew today. Hopefully, you guys will enjoy the stream, however, because we've got a good few topics that we'd like to get to discuss and get into. So, thankfully, football is back. The Premier League is back. We're so happy to see that. We're so happy to see that we finally have a Premier League game this weekend, but it's a 12:30 kickoff. So every cloud and all that shit. But thankfully, it's against Everton, so it shouldn't necessarily be that tough of a game. However, it being a derby will still probably be a bit of a nail-biter of a game. But I digress. We'll move on. Drew, how are you, my friend?
I was doing great until you mentioned all the 12:30 kickoff, which is 4:30 a.m. over here for me. And last year was just an absolute dire experience, but this year a little better, a little better. I think we got the one win so far. Hopefully, we make that too. But yeah, I'm curious with Andy Robertson's injury how bad that's going to be because it's definitely adding an extra bit of spice for this weekend. And with Everton, it's always going to be a huge fixture. I don't care where they are in the table; they can cause trouble, even if that's breaking Virgil van Dijk's leg and screwing up our season. So, fingers crossed, no injuries in the game, an easy 1-0, 2-0 win that I can wake up at 4:30 and go back to sleep feeling good about myself. That'll be good.
Yeah, I do always forget. I suppose me with my American sports and watching the likes of the Niners over the weekend, I do forget that you guys got to get up at ungodly hours in the morning to watch this. So a loss usually feels worse when it completely ruins your whole day. At least with the Niners, it only ruins one night when they lose. So I'd hate to have my whole Saturday ruined. That'd piss me off royally. However, it is Everton that we have against the weekend, and as Drew mentioned, we do have a bit of an injury issue with Andy Robertson with his shoulder injury. Now, I don't know, Drew, if you heard anything more about it, but I haven't. All I know is it's a shoulder injury. He's getting it looked at. We haven't heard anything concrete or confirmed from the club yet as to how long he may be out. I think it's a dislocation, and that can be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on recovery time. But the topic does then need to be discussed of who starts at left back against Everton, and do we go with maybe a different strategy in maybe 3 centre backs and have Kwanzaa in there with Van Dijk and Kanate or Matip or whoever lands in there, or does Kostas Tsimikas finally make his appearance? Because I think this would be a great run of games for him. As it's only myself and Drew, we can only talk so much, I'm afraid. So please do leave any opinions that you have in the chat so that we can get to them. And if you haven't already, just let's make sure that you like and subscribe. It's always free, and you can change your mind afterwards if you don't want to. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscriptions. We're currently at just over 9,750. So let's try and get to that big magic number of 10,000 by the time we hit the next transfer window. But Drew, with Andy Robertson out, who do you think will play, and who would you like to play at left back going forward?
I think Tsimikas will play, and this is really the test by fire for him. I think I would like to see him just come in and do the job. Like, I'd like to see him maybe even push, kind of how Robertson took over when Moreno had his little injury spell. I'm not saying Tsimikas will have that abilities to surpass Robertson, but I want him putting in shifts to where Klopp's like, okay, Tsimikas is getting the job done. Otherwise, I think that kind of messes with the flow too much. Maybe Klopp uses this as an experimental window where he's like, oh, I'll try Gomez at left back, which we know Gomez started his Liverpool career there. 3 at the back. Maybe this is a time to experiment, but I think it really depends on what Klopp wants for the long-term future. We have a like-for-like replacement, so hopefully Tsimikas can get the job done and just fill in as deputy, which has been his role at the club. So I really hope that we're not looking at looking back at this injury as a breaking point for the season and just a speed bump that totally threw us out. But do you see Tsimikas stepping up, or do you see Klopp experimenting with the lineup?
I think I don't think he'll experiment. That's one thing that they've always been fairly standard with. It's a bit of a pain in the ass, but they just don't experiment. But what Paul brings up there in his point, I'll bring up the comment again. I think it'll be a fantastic time to try 3 centre backs with Trent and Verton. it'd be the perfect time to try it, considering the run of games that we have. They're all fairly low standard teams. We have a couple of relegation battling teams. We have Luton and we have Everton in the next 4 to 5 weeks before we hit City. So if you think about it, this is the perfect time. I say it's the perfect time. It's the best time we have to lose Andy Robertson, because we have the ability now to have a soft run of games. Even after the Man City game, there's even another run of soft games there that we could end up gaining an awful lot of points from. Tsimikas, I think it'll be a fairly glowing indictment that if he puts Gomez in there ahead of him, like, what's the point in Tsimikas being here? If that's the case, he is meant to be the Robbo backup or replacement, and is meant to step in the likes of the Europa League games, some Carabao Cup games to give Robbo some time off. That's his job, and clearly, since he signed his new contract, that he's aware that that's his job. So I think it's an open season, more or less, for some new guys, some younger guys to come in and properly cement themselves. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Kwanzaa as well, to come in and cement himself as a future centre back for ourselves. It's a dislocated shoulder. We've not been given any set timeline. It's normally, people are speculating between 4 to 8 weeks is the turnaround for that type of an injury. So we could probably expect him back between the start and the end of November. So he could essentially be back before the City game, or he could be back just after the City game. And even if he did come back and was just back at the City game, I wouldn't rush him back into that game myself. It'd be not too big of an occasion. It's not too big of an occasion for Robbo, but when you're that rusty and you're coming into that high profile of a game, you'd need nearly a warm-up game prior to it. So I think, and if Tsimikas is playing great at that point, it'd only kill his confidence to take him out then at that point as well, when Robbo is just back. Now, I'm not the coaching staff. I don't know how these players will be progressing and recovering, so I may be wrong on that. But what do you think, Drew, about the idea that Paul has here with the back three? With Trent and Verton, you'll have him beside McAllister, would allow us an awful lot more creativity in the midfield. Not that we're lacking it this season, thankfully, but I think it will be a little bit more solid at the back, like how Man City have Gvardiol on the left back role and lets Walker run up and down the pitch.
Again, for me, I think it'd be conditioned on what Klopp would want long term. If he sees that as a long term change or solution or option B that he really wants to implement with the team, then yeah, these run of games are perfect to have that little experimentation. But otherwise, it just seems odd if like Robertson comes back or Tsimikas. Like what you're saying, it's like, what's the point of Tsimikas if he's not backing up Robertson, and what's the point of having that left back, those two left back positions, if you're not going to play them, or you're going to play a back three? And I think it just, like, consistency is really important like moving forward. Like, you don't want to be chopping and changing and switching formations. Like, I know we did the 4-2-3-1 back when, 4-2-3-1 back when Shaqiri was in the lineup, or experimented in that way, having three behind the striker, or playing Shaqiri in that 10 role. But Klopp didn't really do it that often. And I think we did it against Everton when he played like the B squad. And I think the game was like 5-2 or 5-3 a few years ago in the title winning season. But it was like, it's rare for Klopp to switch to those kind of formations or make that. Yeah. And I think especially like maybe if we're up like 3-0 at halftime, he's like, all right, I'm going to experiment with this second half. Or I just, as much as I'd like to see that, that's more something I think of would be a longer term, like preseason implementation project. I don't think you do that at this stage of the season. I don't think you do that against Everton, even though he's done that in the past. I don't think you're doing that when we're 3 points off the top of the table. And we need all these points now.
Yeah, that is right. We need points right now, and this is the perfect time to get 12 points and possibly jump ahead of the likes of City and Arsenal. And as much as it pains me to say Spurs, but Spurs are like an elephant on top of a tree when they're at the top of the Premier League. Nobody knows how they got there, but it's not going to end well. That's the way I look at it. They'll be found out. Spurs have had the easiest run of games so far, and they struggled to put a goal past Luton, and they barely beat a 9-man Liverpool. I have absolutely no worries about Spurs, even though Sky Sports are absolutely choking on them at the moment. But it is what it is. Thankfully, we did an international break not to listen to any of that. Paul, I do agree with you. It is even more of a reason to get a left-sided defender in January to bolster up that side. As much as it pains me to say, Andy Robertson is getting up there in age. He's 28, 29. I say that as I'm 28. But in footballing terms, it's coming close to the twilight of his career. So it would be an idea to start investing in some youth on that side. So I don't disagree with you. Mohamed, it basically seems to be all but done. But we'll get on to a little bit of news on that in a moment. But it seems to be all but done. All of the Brazilian news outlets seem to be reporting that he's going to be a Liverpool player. It's apparently there's rumours he's already spoken to Klopp. Apparently there's rumours that there's already been a pre-contract put in place, and but those are all hearsay. We don't have any solid proof on that as of yet, so we can't confirm or deny that. But look, rumor, there's no smoke without fire, so that's the way that I look at it. Lou threw in a question here, and I think it might be good to have a look at as well. With Diaz struggling in a little bit of his form, now I think he actually kicked back a bit of his form. Excuse me. He got a bit of his form back playing for the national squad against Darwin Núñez. I think he played fantastically in that game. I think the two of them really worked well off each other, even though they were on opposite ends of the pitch. I thought it was great to see they were both firing for their national team. So I think this international break came at a great time for Diaz, but I think it would be nice to see Gakpo maybe be implemented more out on the left and let Darwin sit in the middle and then bring Diaz on and rotate it. It's the problem that we have, that we actually have too many top-class strikers, wingers and strikers, that we need to sort of try and rotate these guys in, and we have to find a way for all of them to fit in, because on their day, all of them could net you a hat-trick. What do you think about him, Gakpo on the left wing when he comes back, if Diaz continues to struggle, that is, Drew?
I think you said it's like great problem to have. I think Gakpo coming in, like I always think back to, I like him up top because it kind of, for me, seems like the natural heir to the Firmino role, maybe a little evolution from that point. But I think back to when he played against Man United when we dropped 7 against them. Like he was off the left on that first goal and was absolutely beautifully finished that. And I think I sent a message to the group too that he combines with Salah, or he has combined with Salah the most out of the front three options. And I think his quality is there for everyone to see. I think he has the abilities to make a position work. I don't like shot. Like I think we're back to the point where we have the most natural rotation of front three, where if Gakpo slips out to the left and Núñez comes up top, or vice versa, or that kind of movement. Like we had that with Salah, Mane, Firmino, where you had this, back to Sturridge, Suarez, Sterling. Like I think that natural ability for the players to interchange and confuse defenders and basically be able to play from anywhere up top. I'm really glad we have that again. I agree with you in terms of Diaz. Like I don't think he's been that bad. I think people are comparing him to Mane, are used to just a lot of goals coming from there, but he has this similar amount of goals to Gakpo and Jota so far this season. So he's not performing any worse number wise coming off the left. And you also take into account the disallowed goal against Tottenham. So, even further there, I think he can dribble himself into the corner at times, but I just like that. He still has the confidence to take on players. I think for me, it'd be worrying if you start seeing Diaz just hold on the ball and pass it back and not take on players to try to make things happen, because we have him in the team to try to make things happen. So I'm not too worried, especially as you said, we have so many options for the front three. Is if he has an off game or he's not getting it done, I'm not putting Diaz in the bin and never playing him again. But we have those options to try Gakpo on the left wing or put Núñez out there, have them interchange. So I think we have so many options that I'm not even worried. And yeah, sure, throw Gakpo in on the left wing for the game. See how he does. Give Diaz a break. He'll probably come off the bench and score a goal because he's that kind of player.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fantastic problem to have one staple right winger that can also play in the middle, but then you have players in the likes of Gakpo, Jota, Diaz, and Núñez that can play all across the front three. And it just creates so much flexibility for yourself and allows you to rotate those guys in and out. And they're all constantly fresh. Obviously, outside of suspensions like Jota's one, but they're all seem to constantly be fresh. And it's great. Just a couple of questions that have come in here. Paul is asking this one. I'll get down through them at the moment. I'll actually go to Richard's one first. No, I wish. And I think it'll be a little bit difficult for Drew to have one, considering he's 6 to 7 hours away in the middle of the US. But no, we don't have season tickets. God, I wish. And as for the Europa League final, that's only up the road for me in Dublin, so I could be going to that. I don't know yet. Drew, have you any plans to go to an EFL Cup game or a Carabao Cup game this season?
I got to West Ham last season, Liverpool West Ham at the end of the season when we won 2-1. So it was the first time I'd been in, I think, like 3 years. So I try to get there. It's like a big vacation for me, to get over there and make it happen. But Europa League final in Dublin, if I could swing that, the missus is definitely. Yeah, I think that's a trip I can convince the missus to go on and put a significant amount of money.
We'll everybody in the group will just bring all the partners. Be like, yeah, it's a romantic trip away to Dublin. Don't worry about it. There's definitely not going to be tens of thousands of Liverpool fans there at all. No, don't worry about it. Be fine. Go shop.
I can sightsee. Well, there's a lot of country to see. All right.
There's a lot of country to see. There's a lot of things that you can see. Even in Dublin itself, there's a lot of things that can be seen and done. So you'd be spoiled for choice when you're there. It's definitely worth the trip over. I think if we did all organize something, do a live stream from within a pub in the middle of Dublin while watching the game, I think it'd be absolutely fantastic, and that'd do numbers. But wishful thinking so far. We got to get to the final first. After that, there is Paul here. Who's a bit of a question for you, Drew, with Hincapie, Inacio, and Arthur Thierry. Rate them 1 to 3 in order. He already knows who I'm going to rate number 1. If you have any interest, Paul, I'd rate Hincapie second and Thierry third. But Inacio is my boy. But I leave it open for yourself, Drew, and we'll get a couple of your thoughts on this for possible options that come in January, maybe next summer.
You've been in my ear about Inacio for months and months and months now, but not but. I'd say I was gonna put him second just to tweak it, but it's probably the one I've looked at the most because Steven's been talking about him for so long, and the transfer fee, the release clause, that not being triggered was very odd. But then I'd say Hincapie, for me, just because of the Xabi Alonso, I've seen a little bit, I think seeing as I don't watch these leagues regularly, I, probably like most of you, where I see the YouTube highlights, check out the FP ref stats and things like that. But kind of intangibles for me, the Xabi Alonso mentorship for Hincapie would be, I think that knowing who Xabi Alonso was as a player, his experience as a player, and then the managers he worked under, I think all of that would be absolutely extremely valuable as a player to have. And for that next move to Klopp, I think that'd be an amazing jump for the player and for Liverpool. So for me, I'd be curious just having Hincapie on those reasons, because it just seems like the perfect kind of match. And then Arthur Thierry, I don't know that much about him, so for me he'd be number 3 because I haven't done as much research or looking into him.
Yeah, the only gripe and the only issue that I really have with Hincapie is purely just the disciplinary stuff. That's my only issue with him. Outside of that, I think he's a top class player. It's just that I've watched him and Inacio in probably the same volume, and just Inacio just screams prime Virgil van Dijk for me. And that's the ceiling that I think he could have. I think Hincapie could be he has a similar floor to Inacio. I just don't think he has as high of a ceiling, if that makes sense. I think he could be a great player. I just think Inacio is probably, we'll look back on it in a couple of years and see Inacio playing for the likes of a Chelsea and Arsenal or a City, and we'd be like, shouldn't fucking got him. He could be overplaying with Barcelona or Real Madrid as well. So it is that level of player that I think that he is. Just as we move on to the Andre news, Andre has the secrets out, it seems, because he's been garnering interest from other Premier League clubs as well, and it's recently been noted that Arsenal are very, very interested in him and will be competing with us to sign his signature in January. Something that I was kind of hoping not for, because there didn't seem to be that much noise around him other than us. But if the sources are to be believed, he will be a Liverpool player. All of the Brazilian sources are basically calling him a Liverpool player. But to get on to Mohammed's question here, this would be a bit of a bold claim. I don't think he will. I could be wrong, but I don't think he's the same type of player as Fabinho or Casemiro, which is why I don't think he will be better than them, because they do something else. But I think, I suppose, contradicting myself, overall he could be better. But Drew, I'll leave it to you to see if you would be of the same opinion. Do you think he could come in and solidify himself as our next Fabinho, if that makes sense?
I think the position's there for the taking. So from that point of view, yes. I'm curious, talking about disciplinary for Nkape. Like, Andre definitely seems like he's a very feisty player, and I think that can be used in the right way, can be a huge asset to have that absolute beast in midfield, like bossing it, like putting in the challenges, the tackles. But I'd almost want to, like, I guess that's where the experience of the squad and the leadership and the older guys kind of can hone him in and focus that aggression, because I think that for me is one of his assets. But it's one of those, like, on the knife edge kind of thing where you could be looking at red cards, and I think that'd be like the worst way to start. Talking about Nunez, I think he had to overcome that early red card, and that set him back a bit, and he had to do so much work. But I think the fact that the 6 is up for grabs, it'd be very interesting to see how he came in if we get him coming in for the January push, because we also have enough midfielders where, Klopp has been forcing Alexis McAllister in the number 6, but Gravenberch is coming up, Szobozslai, Elliott, Curtis Jones. We have so many options that I think Andre would have the perfect kind of lack of pressure to integrate into the team.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the difference between two, like, whereas Casemiro came into United, I know Real Madrid, he just came in, took his spot, and moved forward from there. But it was obvious for United he'd start. Fabinho came in and actually took him some time. Like, Klopp didn't play him right away. But once he got to that position, he was like the number 1 name on the team sheet in the midfield. Every single lineup, he was that first name there. So I think Andre has, like, the gaps there for him to take. Do I think that he can take it? I think he can, but I think he's going to have to show a lot of maturity, because I think he has a lot of raw talent right now, all the right things for this position. I think it's a huge jump to the Premier League, but all the right conditions are there for him to take it. So hopefully he does, if he does come to Liverpool. But where do you stand, Steve? Like, on the technical side, or what his role would be in the club moving forward?
I think he'd actually be a great 8 or a 10, very much like a backup to Szobozslai or McAllister, to come in there and rotate in there, even on a double game week, or games that have midweek games, or if and when we're back in the Champions League next season, to come in and fill in on a weekend if we have a big Champions League game later. Then I think he can also play the 6. There's no problem there. He seems to be able to boss it over in Brazil at the moment, but it's all and that this is nothing to say about the Brazilian league at all. Clearly, they have absolutely top talent players there, but it's one thing to do it in the Brazilian league, and it's another thing and the Copa Libertadores, and it's another thing to do it in the Premier League week in, week out. So, Paul, I agree with you. I think he's more of an N'Golo Kante than a Fabinho. Fabinho is a big 6 foot plus tall, strong physical presence there, whereas Kante was just an engine. He just never stopped. You could not stop him. He was an anticipation monster, and he just was able to get a foot in and read the game fantastically. And I think Andre has those traits, and I think he can come in and allow himself a slow integration. He's not going to be needed to hit the ground running immediately, which is fantastic for him. Very much similar to Endo, I feel, that he doesn't have to hit the ground running straight away. I think Endo will still come good. I don't think he's going, like, anybody that thinks he's going to come in and be Fabinho is ludicrously delusional. He's not. Endo's going to come in and just purely do the job that he used to do in Stuttgart, and that's just clean up the mess. And you can already see him slowly starting to integrate into the team now as well, with the the likes of him coming close and coming forward and receiving passes in the interim between the centre backs from the keeper and from the likes of Van Dijk and all them. So it should be it'll be interesting that if he does come, I can see him solidifying himself in that 6 role. But somebody else that I think would be very, very good in that 6 role, and I don't know if anybody else would agree with me on this, I think Gravenberch should be fantastic in that CDM role. He's a long, rangy, tall, 6'4" physical guy that's great in a duel, that's good on the ball as well. And just with this thing that this comment that Paul made is do I think he can wrestle with McAllister? I think he could come in and just play. What's great is we've a positionless midfield, because Szobozslai can play all 3 positions, McAllister can play all 3 positions, Gravenberch can play all 3 positions. Endo is more of your specialized CDM, if you want to give him that name. But then Andre can also come in and play all 3 positions. So we have player and Curtis can play all 3 positions. I don't think Elliott can, but he's more of an attacking midfielder than a midfielder. He's more of a winger, in my own opinion. And then you have Andre coming in who can play all 3 positions as well. So when you have a positionless midfield like that, it's very much like the front 3 where we can just rotate and rotate and rotate. Now, Drew, I don't know if you'd be of a similar opinion about Gravenberch, but I think he could do a number as the 6 as well.
Yeah, I like what you said about like the rotation in the midfield. I think Klopp kind of likes his players to have that multi-role functionality in the squad. And I'd be curious for me, what I like from a 6 for that kind of position is interceptions, tackles, and getting the ball forward. I think as far as like what you said, like Gravenberch has really, really not surprised me, but impressed me with his ability to receive the ball, turn, or like take on split defenders and progress with the ball. So I think in terms of him receiving the ball in that midfield, turning and helping link up with attack, he'd be perfect in that role. And I'd like to see him get that time regardless, because I think like right now with not an out and out number 6, that it's, it'd be very curious to see what Klopp can mold and how he could play. And that could definitely benefit us as a team moving forward to have that kind of not expected standardized roles. He kind of did that with the wingers scoring most of the goals, the fullbacks getting most of the assists. So he kind of was a catalyst for that in the Premier League, of bringing that up to play and having that connect in. So I'd be very curious if he's trying to like get rid of the traditional number 6, or at least have a hybrid model. But for me, like I'm curious if Gravenberch can have that defensive nous where he can like intercept the passes, because I think Fabinho had such a huge impact in terms of knowing when that transition come. He stopped so many transitions from happening, like right nipped in the bud, got that first pass cut, and then sent us right back on the counter. So I'd be curious if that's something in Gravenberch's locker or something he can pick up quickly, because I think if he can do that, that'd be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's the anticipation. Realistically, you need to see what's happening before it happens, and that's probably one of the main skills that a CDM needs to have. So if Gravenberch can harness that and have that, I think he'd be golden, to be honest with you. But yeah, and it is a funny thing but I am quite enjoying this positionless midfield and positionless front line. It allows us so much flexibility, because it just, a team can't prepare for it. An opposing team can't prepare for it. It's a fantastic way to put the fear of God into a back 4, for lack of a better term. And because you don't know if you're going to have to play a full game against Salah, or next thing Diaz is on you, or all of a sudden now you have to deal with the pace of Nunez, or now you have to deal with Gakpo putting his back against you and playing back to goal, or then you have Jota that you need to just keep an eye on at all times, because he's just going to grab a goal in the 89th minute and win you a game. And then there's the likes of Ben Doak that just will not stop running at you and making you backtrack on your heels. And then you have to deal with Szobozslai firing one in from 30 yards out, or Trent dinking a ball over the top. We said it at the start of the season, we're not going to have a problem with scoring goals this season, and that has been proven evident so far, which is great. Only problem is we're a bit leaky at the back. But we move on from that topic and we get on to the next one, that is essentially mine and Drew's flops and hits of the season. Who's shat the bed, for lack of a better term, and who's actually hit the ground running. I'll give my 3 for each, and then Drew, you can give your 3 for each. And if you have any opinions in the chat, guys, please throw them in as well, because we'd love to hear them and we'll debate them when they come up. But personally speaking, my hits of the season so far have been Szobozslai, and this is for any team really. It's across the Premier League. So Szobozslai would be in one of my top 3, probably the top. James Maddison, then after that as well, has been absolutely fantastic with Spurs. And realistically, if I was to throw another one in there, to be Declan Rice for Arsenal, he does a lot of stuff off the ball and unseen that people that know what he's doing know what he's doing, if that makes sense. He does work that doesn't show up in a stat sheet, is what you'd call it, like the intangibles. I think they'd be the 3 signings of the season for me so far, and the three guys that have hit immediately. An honourable mention to Ryan Gravenberch as well, because he hit the ground running the second he came into the squad, and it's fantastic to see. But that'd be my top 3: be Szobozslai, James Maddison, and Declan Rice as well. What about you, Drew? Who do you think your 3 hits are?
I'm true, like that. You took my 3 from me, but I'm trying to think if there's anyone else who deserves the shout out, because I think for me the clear
Ward-Prowse as well. Ward-Prowse is really fun.
That's a solid one. He's definitely done shifts at West Ham, and see how far they are up in the table. No one put that, but I put them as my surprise package of the year. So I thought that David Moyes would get them rolling on from the Conference League final, and it's interesting to see the mix of teams up in the top. But I think far from like standout stars, it's hard to look far from James Maddison and Szobozslai for standouts. I like your shout on Declan Rice. As much as I hate Arsenal, I was going to include him on my top 3 as well, because I think, with that price tag, it's easy to just ghost and disappear in games. But you're right, like people watching the game, like he just controls the game really well. He's had a lot of good moments, not just that goal in the 90th plus minute was against United. He's done very well to come in and be composed with such a young age and the price tag that he had. When you look at the other £100 million players in the Premier League who haven't hit the ground running, he's done a good job for Arsenal, as much as I hate to admit it. But I'll include a couple flops for them as well when we get to that.
So will I. I think it's all United flops for me. Paul, I think it was Odegaard wasn't signed this summer, was he? This is more so just signings for this summer that have come in, and that's what we would have considered like hits this summer that would have come in. But Odegaard has been doing numbers. You're not wrong there. I think he's been fantastic as well. So for my own flops, I'd have to honestly pick. I think it's a bit unfair to call him a flop, but Romeo Lavia going to Chelsea, it's unfair to call him a flop, but you pay 58 million, nearly 60 million for a player, and he can't even get into the squad. Even for a Carabao Cup game, he can't get into the squad. Now, maybe it's the injury issues that he's been having. Maybe I hope nobody thinks I'm being a salty Liverpool fan because Chelsea got him. I'd love for the kid to succeed, but I think he just was led down the wrong path and going to Chelsea after the Caicedo signing, and I think he's probably absolutely regretting that decision. And I feel for him, I do. But at the same time, I don't feel for him because he's a grown man and he made a decision, and you kind of got to live with it. But I'll put him as an honourable mention. I won't disgrace him as such as that. I would definitely have. What's his name? Oh, I can't think of it. I'll think of it. It'll come to me in a moment. But I would have Nicholas Jackson actually as a bit of a flop for me, purely just because he's like he missed such a sitter. If Darwin Núñez done the same thing, it would be on every sports channel and meme page for months. The poor kid that was probably in row Z that got nailed in the face with that ball is definitely going to sue for damages. But he'd be my number 2. I'm going to put Romeo Lavia at 3 and Caicedo as well at 3, because the two of them just haven't lived up to it at all. The fact that Chelsea paid the amount of money that they did for them, And the fact that we basically rebuilt our midfield for the same price is absolutely hilarious. But it is what it is. Chelsea can go and pump their money into their fake sponsorship brand that only makes 12 million a year, but is somehow sponsoring them for 40 million a year. But my main and number one flop for the year is Andre Onana. How could it not be? Like, the amount of money that they paid for him, they basically actually, yes, that's who I was thinking of, Paul. Thank you so much. Kai Havertz. That's who I was thinking of. I couldn't think of him, so I just had to think of somebody else. And there was a London club too, so it was Chelsea. But yeah, Kai Havertz has been absolutely shocking. Like, say what you want about Chelsea, but the fact that they sold Mason Mount and Kai Havertz for over 120 million pounds is robbery or it's pure fraud. But Andre Onana has been absolutely shocking for me. And what's hilarious is David De Gea is still a free agent, and I think it'd be absolutely hilarious if they went and signed him again. But he's been terrible. Anybody that has ever played in goal at any competitive level, I've done it myself. I've played keeper for years and years and years. You just know he's not comfortable with stopping shots. And United have done a full 180 on the keeper that they had. They had a keeper that couldn't play with his feet, but could stop shots and just won a golden glove. And they moved off to somebody that could essentially just be their CDM. But he's a pair of gloves on him and he sits in goal. He has no power in his wrists. He's no power in his shots. He seems to have such delayed reactions for such savable shots, which end up being goals, which is an absolutely shocking thing for a keeper. And something that I think De Gea did, and I hate having to compliment a Man United goalkeeper, but De Gea and Alisson seem to be one of few keepers that do it anymore, is saving with your legs. I don't see many keepers doing that anymore. And Alisson, maybe even Man City keeper, if name escapes me at the moment. Ederson, thank you, his other Brazilian compatriot. He also does it too, and De Gea was just a pure shot stopper. But they've gone full 180 now, and they've gotten a guy that can't stop shots but can play with his feet. You might as well play him as a centre back because that's realistically all he's able to do. He can't stop shots at all. But I'll relay it over to Drew for his flops of the season because I think we'll be similar on one of them anyway.
Oh yeah, definitely similar on one of them, but I'm not going to include any Chelsea players in on the flops. One for Lavia because I think the injury and like the amount of players there, like I compare him like almost like Calvin Phillips, whereas like Calvin Phillips isn't playing because Pep thinks he's not good. Like when he's played, it's been terrible. I don't think we've yet to see Lavia and his age too, so I'm going to give him that grace period and how poorly run Chelsea is. Caicedo as well. I think the fact that Chelsea have an exorbitant amount of money to spend, it's not even like that price tag doesn't even matter because there's like two other players on the team who are up there and doing way worse than him, or relatively when you look at like Mudryk or something like that. So I think Chelsea escapes flop this season because they're in a category of their own. But for me, I'd say Kai Havertz is definitely maybe number 3 or 2. But I just think for me, it was just such a bizarre transfer because it was a position they don't need. And they're like forcing him, or they had for the first few games, forcing him into like this Granit Xhaka role. It's like, it's like that's not what he played. He was like the number 10 back in Germany. And now he's, was he false 9 at Chelsea, and he could never get the ground running there. And then when you bring him in the Arsenal squad, it just didn't make sense. Like considering how much money they spent on him, was it 65? Yeah, 65 million for Havertz. They still don't have an out-and-out goal-scoring striker. It just seemed an odd purchase, and they're trying to Arteta's trying to pigeonhole them into the team. And we'll see. Maybe he gets it to work, but it just seemed like a poor mismanagement, and so far flop. Number two and number 1 for me, I'd say like Mount and Onana for United. It just didn't seem like it addressed what they needed, or the goalkeeper they thought it did with Onana. But everything you said, he just it's just an ongoing meme, like his positioning, like how he's on his heels when a shot's being taken. Like they're just they're gaffes that are inexcusable at this level. And because he's already conceded I think stats on this was like a couple weeks ago. It was like 9 goals from like 10 shots or like 12 shots or something like
something
that.
nuts like.
it's embarrassing, and especially like I don't want to give it any sort of like any added weight to it or anything. But for me, the decision when you like he came out to yell at Maguire, not saying that Maguire can be yelled at for any inordinate number of things, but like that decision to do it in like a preseason game, like that just is opening yourself up. If you can't do the business, that's like bringing like a Ronaldo ego into the game and yelling at your teammates when you haven't even been there a week or whatever it being. And then to have this come back, it's just an embarrassing situation.
Yeah.
Kind of sums up Manchester United. And then Mount, another one where, I think United, another team that could, I guess they got Hoyland, but out and out striker. Maybe you could have used that for a little bit more experienced striker. I don't know. Just seemed like their funds were really poorly mismanaged, not addressing the positions that they needed, and then Mount. Just like you said, Chelsea just getting away with highway robbery for Havertz and Mount fees. So for me, those would be my three. But really quick jump for another signing of the season. Put that in quotes. Maybe on the lower end relegation side. I thought Jack Harrison pickup for Everton has proved to be quite good for them. So that'd be my outside shout for lower end of the table. Just throwing that in there.
No, yeah, I think that's he could do a decent job there. Not that we like to say anybody from Everton would be good, but look, we'll call a spade when we see it. But yeah, it's I just can't get over it. Like for United have just been a calamity of errors so far this season and all throughout the summer. And I know it's fun to say as Liverpool fans that it's hilarious to watch and everything, but it is something that I do want to bring up, and it'll be the last point that we make is just some ownership conversation, just purely from the news that came out with United recently that they were offered an amount nearly over double the market valuation of the club, and they still turned it down. How that cannot be seen as pure greed and negligence is beyond me. But it's United have made their bed, and I don't have any sympathy for their fans either, purely because they still went and filled Old Trafford. They still went and bought all the merch. They still went and done everything. They did joke about getting the green and yellow scarves out and whatnot and all that, but they've still fed their pockets and they've said nothing about it. They've supported both managers that are purely mouthpieces. I think Erik ten Hag has lost the dressing room, in my own opinion, because and I had him as my first manager to go in our predictions earlier in the year. But it brings up an interesting topic because it's a stick that we use to beat Man City with an awful lot. It's, you're bought, you're not built. We built our success. You bought your success, as if it to devalue it a little bit. And this is something that I was about to get at, JMUs, is there was rumblings earlier in the season that when the United deal fell through earlier in the season, or reports of it that did, is that Sheikh Jassim essentially wanted to move on to a club that was already established and had a deep history, which is why he kind of went for United in the first place. But then he also had eyes on the likes of Arsenal or Liverpool. And the question I'll pose to everybody in the chat, and the question I'll pose to Drew, is if we got oil money, would you be comfortable with us having that money, given the ramifications and possible source of where the money came from, like a City?
I'd be torn, to be honest. I wouldn't know until I saw like who bought us and like everything behind it. On the other, like I'd be much more comfortable with like actually I don't even know. It'd be tough for me.
It's a hard one. It's a hard one. It's a hard one to contemplate, purely because on the one hand, we're not constricted by budget, but then on the other hand, it kind of, for me, it makes us hypocrites. Well, it makes me a hypocrite. I don't want to speak for anybody else. Because it's something that I've used to slate City and call attention to the fact that City are checkbook merchants and they have no history, they have no legacy, they have nothing like that. But and that's why we will be considered a better franchise, so to speak, a better team, because we've done it the right way. We've adhered to all the rules. We're not caught in any scandals. We don't have 115 charges against us. We don't have referees coming over to the United Arabian Emirates. That sort of a thing. And Jimmy, I don't think this will be an issue purely because of Liverpool itself and how we are as a club. I think with the likes of issues like that, if you've seen it with Mo Salah and how much he's done for the Muslim community in Liverpool itself, I think that wouldn't be an issue. I'd like to think that us as a club wouldn't change our values because of that, regardless of ownership. But I do see where you're coming from with that point as well. But I don't think they have any issues about that with City. Like they do celebrate Pride, they celebrate all of that stuff, and there's never been any issues with that. As far as I'm aware, I've not really looked into it myself. But on one hand, it's a stick that we used to beat City with, and I feel like a hypocrite for accepting it. But at the same time, as Paul mentions here, we'd already have Bellingham and Guardiola at Anfield and be currently unbeaten. So it's I'd rather the devil in my own opinion, but I leave that to the powers that be. I don't know about you, Drew.
It's interesting for me because I see it on like two sides. Like if we were bought by oil money or like billionaire owners, that kind of influx where you're seeing like 200, 300 million in like every, like almost if like Todd Bowley bought Liverpool, I almost feel like there'd be some sort of like, whoa, we earned it in a way because we have done it the past 10 years and built it up to the level where it'd be almost like you're offered a job where you're getting paid an obscene amount of money. If hopefully that happens to everyone, but like if that did happen, like a part of that would be like you're worth it. And I don't think that'd be like a charity buy where it's just like you're basically like almost getting like a sugar mama or a sugar daddy and then just getting built up from nothing, like you're driving like a rust bucket. Next thing you know, you're driving, a Ferrari. I think we've had already done the hard work to get us to where we are considered one of the best clubs in the world, how we're run, the players that we have, etc. So that kind of jump up, I wouldn't feel as bad on that end. But on the other side of it, I always compare it to like playing FIFA. Like it's almost like putting like it on easy mode and then just playing a season on easy.
500 million, like.
Yeah, it's like you look at City's treble winning season last year, and like I don't think anybody really like as far as like football players like football on the pitch. Like I like everyone hates watching City. I like watching the players. I like watching good players play good football, and I like to see the intricate kings, good coaches, Pep, etc. But like you see, like no one's talking about it outside of that. Like seeing the City celebrations, like the fanfare. It's like when you like it's almost spoiled. Like that's the word I'd use for that. You're spoiled at that point, and if you're not winning, like it's you're like a brat child who just wants the newest toy, or well, like I didn't get my allowance this weekend, or I didn't get my trophy this year. I think you're playing FIFA on easy mode, and it's very quickly going to become something that just doesn't have the heart and the passion that working hard and achieving something as a team, as a city, as a fan base, as a whole can like appreciate and celebrate together. Like that Liverpool slogan, "This means more." I think there is something to that, and I'd be very hesitant to give that up.
No, I agree. To be honest with you, the way that I look at it is I feel that 2005 Champions League final that we won is worth more than City's treble. That's the way I look at it. And I think purely because of the fact that we shouldn't have been in that game. We shouldn't have been there. I know it's not really much to compare, but it's anybody that watches American sports, when Dirk Nowitzki won his first title with Dallas, I feel it meant more than when Kevin Durant went and joined the Golden State Warriors and won his two, because Dirk was a lifer. He stayed there it'd be like Steven Gerrard's career compared to somebody that jumps from team to team to team, trying to buy success rather than do it. But that's anybody that watches American sports will understand that one. But I agree with you. I think it's a very complicated one because on one hand, as you mentioned, we've earned it, but then on the other hand, it's just on easy mode. Then at that point, what's the point? Where's the fanfare? Because you see it with City, they've done something historic that hadn't been done since 1999 with United, and nobody cared. Imagine doing something that hadn't been done in 24 years, and nobody gave a shit because the team that you had. And I just think that that's something I'd like to think that wouldn't happen at Liverpool, but the consistent winning would probably get boring. I say that now, but Jesus, I'd love if we just went undefeated for the rest of the season. But I do agree with you when it attracts so many glory hunter fans that I think it would be just meh. And Paul, I agree with you. LeBron's title in Cleveland is worth more than the ones that he won in Miami and with the Lakers. Now, I think maybe the one that he came back and won with Miami after losing to Dirk, I think that was probably his best one. But yeah, I do know what you mean with saying the one in Cleveland probably is worth more to him, especially considering it's his hometown. But I think the one where he bounced back after getting slapped by a 40-year-old blonde German man in the finals is probably the better one, so to speak. But I think that Dirk Nowitzki championship is probably one of the best ones that I've ever seen, purely because of the teams that he beat. But this is the Liverpool channel. I won't be talking about American sports here because I could talk for fucking hours. But there's a couple of comments here that I want to get to, and we'll finish off. So Paul asks here our opinion on Henderson getting booed. Does want him to play for England, not because he's a hypocrite and going Saudi, because I just don't think he's good enough. Yeah, I made that comment on Twitter too. Gareth Southgate was saying, I don't know why he's getting booed. And I was like, I can tell you, Gareth, because he's shite. It's quite literally that simple. There's no superlative, there's no hidden agenda, there's no, oh, he's a hypocrite for going to the Saudi league. Well, there is that, but that's not the reason people are booing. And the reason people are booing him and you is because he's shit. But that's my own opinion on it, Drew. I don't know if you'd agree with that or if there's any hidden agenda against our poor, dear, darling, departed Jordan Henderson.
No, I think Southgate has dug his own grave with this one. He's done it in the past too. It's like picking Maguire or Calvin Phillips when they're not playing for their club. I think the precedent of he wouldn't pick Sancho because he was in the Bundesliga and not in the Premier League, and now Henderson's off in Saudi Arabia, and it's like quite clearly not. It's quite clearly not a good league, and if you're playing in a league that's not a retirement, I don't see him calling up anybody from in the MLS. So to that kind of level, it's why are you calling up somebody who's essentially taken a downgrade in the career when you have so many players to choose from in England who are taking a step up? James Ward-Prowse. So there's so many different, and that's what it gets annoying for me for is, and he's just historically done this. And I think, for me, I don't really care if England wins or not. I'm not too chuffed about it one way or the other, but I'm surprised they haven't won something yet because their squad is arguably the best squad in Europe. Them in France, it should be that every single time. And you don't get any points for having the toys that he has at his disposal and doing hitting a par on the course. You should be hitting that at the very least. So I think the fans are frustrated that he's essentially picking friends and buddies over who deserves it.
Yeah, that's essentially, and I think Haley, this is what we're kind of getting at. It's not so much low. I think it's Jordan Henderson just isn't at the pace to be an English player at the moment, and this is a bit rich coming from a guy that's an Irish man who has an abysmal national team, and I have no problem admitting that. But there's just sometimes when Father Time has had his way and it's time to take a step off and let some other young blood come through. When you have the midfield talent that England has currently at the moment, all under the age of 27 or 28, like James Ward-Prowse, Jude Bellingham, who's tearing it up in the La Liga at the moment, Curtis Jones even somebody along the lines of that. There's plenty of other English midfielders currently at the moment that could come in and do numbers there. As it is, I think the booing is more so towards Jordan Henderson as a player rather than a person, although I think he's a little bit sickening as a person myself, considering how I think he's a bit of a hypocrite, considering he showed his true colors by going to the Saudi League. But that's an opinion I'll keep off stream purely because I don't want to get into a political debate on it. But I do think that there's so many better players for that England squad, and it pains me to say it as an Irishman, but that England squad is probably one of the best in Europe, as you mentioned, Drew. And it's absolutely inexcusable that they're losing games to much inferior sides and just not able to perform at tournaments. When you have that level of quality, it's just that. Paulie has had a decent career. I think he's never been more than average, but what pushed him above average, where he was world class for a period of time, was just his drive and commitment and his legs. But they've gone now. That's where he's faltered, unfortunately, at this moment. And when your legs go and that's all that you can rely on, and you can't rely on anything else, and you're just an engine, you slowly and you very quickly fall out of favor and end up having to go to the Saudi League. That's what happens. That's what happened with the MLS for years as well after David Beckham went. But it is what it is. The last topic that we'll get on to, we'll just do the predictions because we'll have a lineup and everything done towards the weekend on Friday. So Liverpool and Everton on Saturday. Again, another 12:30 kickoff, as is the bane of Drew's existence. His 4:30 in the morning starts. Rather you than me, buddy, but it's that'd be a pain. I get up early to watch the Formula One. I got up at 6 a.m. to watch the Japanese Grand Prix once before and the Australian Grand Prix, and it killed me. I hated it. So I can only imagine what it's like for this, just to sit and watch cars go around in a circle for 90 minutes. But my prediction, 3-1, as it has been all season. It's never been anything but that. We'll go 1-0 down, and then we'll come back, and Darwin Núñez will score 2, and Mo Salah will score the 3rd, and that'll be us. Happy days. Drew, how about you to finish off the stream? What do you think will be at the weekend?
2-0. Just give me a 2-0, nice and easy. Can wake up, probably watch it in my bed. I have to go to a wedding later in the day. So it's going to be a fun day. But 2-0, nice, easy start. Smooth rolling, get back to bed after.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just address this comment from Haley here. Just, do you rate a player mostly for what he's done at the end of his career, or do you rate it for what he's done throughout his career, especially with Henderson? For me, that's a difficult one. It's kind of, he done numbers for us. He did help us a lot. He helped us in the Champions League winning season. He helped us in the Premier League winning season. There's no doubt about it. Nobody's taken anything away from what Jordan Henderson has done. However, the writing was on the wall last season when him and James Milner who was around Fabinho, and you had 2 old age pensioners essentially who didn't have the legs anymore, and Fabinho was basically trying to do the job of 3 people, which is why he kind of got exposed an awful lot last season. But then when Trent came in to help him in the double pivot, that you seen him back to his best when he had some assistance with somebody that had legs. So that's my own opinion on it. I rate a player on their entire career, good and bad. You can't just pigeonhole it and look at specific good years. Otherwise, we'd be looking at people that had 1-year wonders and thinking they're the greatest ever. The problem is that we have the likes of Ronaldo and Messi, where people think peak years last for 15 years, when that's really not the case. It's just that they're 2 complete generational players and enigmas, and we may never see the like of them again. But Drew, to finish us off before we hit the hour mark, what do you think about this? Do you rate a player on what he's done at the end of his career, the start, or do you look at it as a whole picture?
I viewed it almost as like a book, like a good book. Like some books take a little bit to launch off and they have a great carry through to the end. But I think books that end badly, or a story that has a really poor end, just leaves a sour taste, even if you've had let's say it's 100. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Movie, show, whatever you're having. If the movie ends poorly, if the show ends poorly, if the story ends poorly, that's going to stick with you. And it can tarnish some of the earlier parts. So I think it needs a lot of time and separation when you can look back. I think that's why when you look at nostalgia, like players from like the 90s, 80s, 70s, the Dalglishs, etc., John Barnes, like I know his career, like his injuries later on, that kind of thing. Like you can look with it with a bit of removedness, like Game of Thrones even, where you're just like, okay, the show was amazing up to this point. and you can speak with it less emotionally. But right after that season ended, that last one, you're like, this show sucks. Like you can't you can't just end that way. So I think there's that kind of emotion that gets brought up, especially in something where people are as passionate about as football or sports or anything like that. So I think of it like a book, but that's always like versus Milner. I like how you brought him up. Like he's gonna have an amazing book. His story is amazing, and how he's ending it is just like it's petering out, but it's respectable. It's like you're reading, you're like, okay, this is this isn't a wild climatic finish, but this is a nice fade out, fade to black versus
walking off into the sunset.
Exactly. It could be a little boring, but kind of fits James Milner as a person. But that's where I sit on it. I think some players are, those moments are always going to be bad moments in the story or viewed by some people as such, and that's fair. But you're right. You have to take the book as a whole, but you're not going to be able to unemotionally grade it until you're detached from that emotion.
Yeah, that's essentially what I think as well. Anyways, guys, we've just hit over the hour mark. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us. Please, if you haven't done so already, like and subscribe. If you have done so, thank you so much. Make sure you have the bell notification on for all of our future streams and videos. We always appreciate it. It's very, very much helpful towards the channel, and it always helps us make better content for you guys. From myself, from Drew, thank you guys so much for joining us on this very quiet Monday evening. We'll be back again tomorrow at 7:30 as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.